The silver chains burned against my wrists as the auctioneer's gavel rose, but it wasn't the metal that made me tremble, it was the scent of ancient power that suddenly filled the air, making every wolf in the crowd bare their necks in submission. I'd never smelled anything like it before. Rich and dark, like storm clouds and midnight forests, with an undertone of something that made my bones ache with recognition I couldn't name. The crowd of buyers went deadly silent, their earlier jeers and crude comments dying in their throats. "What the hell?" muttered Jake Morrison, the auctioneer, his gavel frozen mid-air above the wooden podium. His beady eyes darted nervously across the auction floor of the old barn, searching for the source of that overwhelming presence. I knew I should keep my head down like always, but something compelled me to look up. Through the crowd of shifters who'd come to bid on Shadowmere Pack's monthly offerings of slaves and debtors, a path seemed to open. And there he was. Tall didn't begin to cover it. The man, no, the alpha, who stood at the back of the barn made every other wolf present look like a pup. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite, all sharp angles and harsh beauty. But it was his eyes that stole my breath. Golden amber, like honey touched by sunlight, and they were staring directly at me. "Lot 17, Jake called out, his voice cracking slightly. "Kira Thorne, age 17, no wolf, mother's debts total 50,000. 1 million. The words rang out across the barn like a gunshot. Several people actually stumbled backward, and I heard Mrs. Garrett, the pack's gossip queen, suck in a sharp breath. Jake's mouth fell open. "I'm sorry, did you say $1 million? The stranger's voice carried easily across the space, smooth as aged whiskey and twice as intoxicating. "Cash." My legs nearly gave out. 1 million? For me? The worthless girl with no wolf, whose only value was in the manual labor I could provide until my body gave out. It had to be some kind of mistake. "Sir, I think you misunderstood," Jake stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "This lot is damaged goods. No wolf, bad bloodline, mother was a gambling addict." Did I stutter? Those golden eyes never left mine, and I felt something stir deep in my chest, something that had been sleeping for so long I'd forgotten it existed. 1 million. Final offer. Beta Collins, Shadowmere's second-in-command, pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with greed and confusion. "Now hold on, we don't even know who you are. What pack do you represent?" The stranger smiled, and it was the most beautiful and terrifying thing I'd ever seen. Power radiated from him in waves that made my skin prickle and my heart race. "I represent myself. Darius Blackthorne, Alpha King of the North American Territories." The barn erupted. Chairs scraped against the floor as wolves dropped to their knees, heads bowed in submission. Even Beta Collins looked ready to faint. The Alpha King, the most powerful werewolf on the continent, was here, in our rundown barn, bidding on slaves. My mind reeled. I'd heard stories about Darius Blackthorne my entire life. The wolf who'd united the scattered packs under one rule. The alpha who could kill with a look and command armies with a word. He was legend, myth, the boogeyman parents used to frighten misbehaving pups. And he was buying me. "Your Majesty," Beta Collins wheezed, struggling to regain his composure. "We had no idea. If we'd known you were coming, you would have hidden your more interesting merchandise." Darius stepped forward, each movement fluid and predatory. "How fortunate that you didn't." Jake's hands shook as he brought down the gavel. "Sold. To His Majesty, Alpha King Darius." Two massive men appeared at Darius's shoulders, his guards, I realized. They moved toward the platform where I stood chained, but Darius held up a hand. "No." He climbed the steps himself, each footfall making the old wood groan. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. Heat radiated from his body, and that intoxicating scent wrapped around me like a blanket. "I'll handle this myself." His fingers touched the silver chains at my wrists, and I hissed as they burned against my skin. "Silver," he murmured, and there was something like anger in his voice. How original. The chains dissolved at his touch, literally melted away like ice in summer. I stared at my unmarked wrists in shock. Silver burns left scars that never healed. I should be marked for life. These will do better, he said, producing a set of golden restraints that gleamed like captured sunlight. They were beautiful, intricate, and when he fastened them around my wrists, they felt warm instead of burning. A gift from the moon herself. I found my voice at last, though it came out as barely a whisper. Why? He paused in his work, those incredible eyes meeting mine again. And for just a moment, his carefully controlled expression cracked. I saw something raw there, something that looked almost like pain. Because, he said quietly, so only I could hear, I've been looking for you for a very long time, little star. Little star. The endearment hit me like a physical blow. My mother used to call me that, back when I was small, and she still sang me lullabies before the gambling took her completely. No one had called me that since she died 5 years ago. I don't understand, I whispered. His hand touched my cheek, gentle as a breath. You will. The golden chains connected to a longer lead, which he wrapped around his wrist rather than handing to one of his guards. He was claiming me personally, I realized, with a mixture of terror and something else I didn't want to name. Your Majesty, Beta Collins called out, still trying to salvage some advantage from this bizarre situation. Perhaps you'd like to stay for dinner? We could discuss pack business. No. Darius didn't even glance his way. We leave now. He started down the steps, and I had no choice but to follow. The golden chain didn't burn, but it held me as surely as any silver. The crowd parted before us like water, every wolf we passed dropping their eyes in submission. But as we reached the barn doors, I couldn't help but look back at the only home I'd ever known. Shadowmere might have treated me like dirt, but it was familiar dirt. Now I was being led into the unknown by a man, an alpha, who claimed to have been searching for me. A worthless slave girl with no wolf. The contradiction made no sense, but as we stepped out into the fading daylight and I saw the convoy of black SUVs waiting for us, I realized sense might be a luxury I could no longer afford. Don't be afraid, Darius said softly, his hand finding the small of my back as he guided me toward the lead vehicle. You're safe now. Safe. The word should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified me. Because as his guard opened the door and I got my first glimpse of the luxurious interior that would carry me away from everything I'd ever known, I caught my own reflection in the tinted window. For just a split second, my plain brown eyes flashed gold. The door closed behind us with a soft click, sealing my fate. As the convoy pulled away from Shadowmere, carrying me toward a future I couldn't begin to imagine, one question burned in my mind. If I really was wolfless, then what had just stirred to life inside my chest at the sound of his voice? And why did the most powerful alpha in North America look at me like I was something precious he'd lost and finally found again? Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. The Blackthorn Palace wasn't what I'd expected. I'd imagined something cold and fortress-like, all stone walls and iron bars befitting a ruthless alpha king. Instead, the sprawling estate that rose from the mountainside looked like something from a fairy tale, all soaring towers and graceful arches that seemed to grow naturally from the granite cliffs. Gardens cascaded down the terraced slopes in waterfalls of color, and everywhere I looked, there was beauty that took my breath away. Welcome home, Darius said quietly as our convoy wound up the tree-lined drive. Home. The word sent an odd pang through my chest. I'd never had a real home, not since my mother died. Shadowmere had been a place of survival, nothing more. The massive front doors opened as we approached, revealing a woman who could have stepped from the pages of a fashion magazine. Tall, elegant, with silver-streaked auburn hair swept into a perfect chignon, she moved with the fluid grace of an alpha female. Her green eyes swept over me with cool assessment. Your Majesty, she said, inclining her head just enough to show respect without subservience. I wasn't expecting you to return with company. Kira, Darius said, his hands still resting at the small of my back. This is Elena Cortez, my head of household. Elena, this is Kira Thorne. She's under my personal protection. Elena's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose a fraction. I see. And her quarters? The Luna Suite. The words hung in the air like a bombshell. Elena's composure cracked just slightly, and I felt my own heart skip a beat. The Luna Suite, that was where the Alpha King's mate would stay. But I was just a slave, a possession he'd bought at auction. Your Majesty, Elena said carefully, perhaps there's been some confusion. The Luna Suite is where she'll stay. Darius's voice carried that unmistakable tone of command that brooked no argument. See that she has everything she needs. Clothes, toiletries, whatever she requires. Elena recovered quickly, her professional mask sliding back into place. Of course. Miss Thorne, if you'll come with me. I looked back at Darius uncertainly. He hadn't released the golden chain that bound my wrists, and I wasn't sure if I was supposed to follow Elena or stay with him. Go, he said gently, finally unwrapping the chain from his wrist. But instead of removing the golden cuffs, he simply let the connecting length disappear into thin air. Magic. I'll find you later. The promise in those words made my skin flush with heat I didn't understand. Elena led me through corridors that belonged in a museum, past priceless artwork and tapestries that probably cost more than Shadowmere's entire yearly budget. Servants bustled about their duties, but I noticed how they all stopped to bow when they saw us, or rather, when they realized where Elena was taking me. Here we are, Elena said, opening double doors that revealed a suite larger than the entire slave quarters back at Shadowmere. I stepped inside and nearly stumbled. The room was breathtaking, all cream silk and warm gold accents, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the mountains. A massive four-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in fabric that looked like captured moonbeams. Fresh flowers filled crystal vases, and a fire crackled welcomingly in an ornate fireplace. The closet is through there, Elena said, gesturing to another set of doors. I've taken the liberty of ordering some appropriate clothing in your size. They should arrive within the hour. I don't understand, I said, finding my voice at last. Why am I here? I'm just a slave. I should be in the servant quarters. Elena studied me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. You're not just anything, dear. The Alpha King doesn't make casual purchases, especially not for $1 million. The reminder of that astronomical sum made my head spin. But I'm worthless. Everyone said so. No wolf, bad bloodline. Everyone, Elena said firmly, was wrong. She moved to the windows, gazing out at the mountains. I've served this family for 30 years, child. I've never seen the Alpha King look at anyone the way he looked at you in that barn. Heat bloomed in my chest at her words, followed quickly by confusion and fear. How did he look at me? Elena turned back to me, and for the first time, her expression was almost gentle. Like you were something precious he thought he'd lost forever. Before I could process that statement, she was moving toward the door. Dinner is at 8, but you're not required to attend if you'd prefer to rest. There's a call button by the bed if you need anything. Tomorrow, the Alpha King wants to see you in the library at 10. The library? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Yes. He seems to think you might be useful there. Elena paused at the door, studying me again. Can you read, dear? I hesitated. Admitting literacy could be dangerous for a slave. It implied education above your station, time stolen from duties to pursue forbidden knowledge. But something about Elena's tone suggested she already suspected. A little, I said carefully. She smiled then, the first genuine warmth I'd seen from her. I thought so. Sleep well, Kira Thorne. Tomorrow, I suspect, will be a very interesting day. After she left, I stood alone in the magnificent suite, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning I'd been chained to an auction block, expecting to be sold to some brutal master who would work me until I dropped. Now I was standing in rooms fit for a queen, wearing golden cuffs that felt warm instead of binding, with promises of working in a library instead of scrubbing floors. None of it made sense. I explored the suite like a child in a candy store, touching silks and satins I'd only ever seen from a distance. The bathroom was larger than the room I'd shared with 3 other slaves at Shadowmere, complete with a massive tub that looked like it was carved from a single piece of marble. The clothes Elena had promised arrived right on schedule, boxes and boxes of beautiful things in my exact size. Simple but elegant pieces in soft colors, nothing that screamed wealth but everything of obvious quality. I held up a sweater the color of summer sky and wondered how they'd known I'd always been drawn to that particular shade of blue. As the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of fire, I found myself drawn to the windows again. Somewhere in this palace was the man who'd changed my life with 2 simple words, 1 million. The Alpha King who'd called me Little Star and looked at me like I mattered. I touched the golden cuffs at my wrists. They'd grown warm against my skin, almost like living things. When I concentrated, I could swear I felt a pulse through them, not my own heartbeat, but something else. Something that made my chest tight with an emotion I couldn't name. Sleep came fitfully, full of dreams where golden eyes watched me from the shadows and a voice like aged whiskey whispered words I couldn't quite remember when I woke. The next morning, Elena appeared with breakfast and clothes laid out for my library assignment. The outfit was perfect. Dark jeans, a soft cream sweater, and boots that fit like they'd been made for me. I caught sight of myself in the mirror and barely recognized the girl looking back. Clean, well-fed, dressed in clothes that didn't hang in tatters, I looked almost normal. The library is in the East Wing, Elena said, leading me through more corridors lined with portraits of stern-faced alphas from centuries past. His Majesty is already there, waiting for you. My steps slowed as we approached a set of towering oak doors. Elena? What does he want from me? Really? She stopped, turning to face me fully. I don't know, she admitted. But I've never seen him at peace the way he was last night after you arrived. Whatever you are to him, child, it's important. More important than you can possibly imagine. The library doors opened to reveal a room that belonged in a cathedral. Shelves stretched up 3 stories, connected by rolling ladders and spiral staircases. Books filled every available space, leather-bound volumes that looked ancient beyond measure, modern texts with pristine spines, scrolls and manuscripts tucked into specially designed cases. And there, seated at a massive desk near the tall windows, was Darius. He looked different in the morning light. Less intimidating, more human, though that word felt wrong applied to someone who radiated such otherworldly power. He'd traded his formal clothes for dark jeans and a black sweater that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. His dark hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it. "Good morning," he said, looking up from the book he'd been reading. Those golden eyes swept over me, and I felt that familiar flutter of heat in my chest. "How did you sleep?" "Well, I managed, though it was only half true." "Thank you for all of this." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Sit. Please." I settled into the leather chair, hyper-aware of how he watched my every movement. The golden cuffs caught the light, drawing his attention to my wrists. "Do they hurt?" he asked quietly. "No." I touched one of them self-consciously. "They're warm, actually. Almost alive." Something flickered in his expression. "They're very old. Made by moon magic, forged during the first wars between the packs. They respond to their wearers' emotions." "What do you mean?" "Touch them," he said. "Feel what they're telling you." I pressed my palm against one of the cuffs and gasped. It wasn't just warm, it was pulsing, like a heartbeat. But as I concentrated, I realized it wasn't my heartbeat I was feeling. It was his. "How?" I whispered. "Because they were made to connect 2 souls who belong together," he said simply. "They haven't responded to anyone in over 300 years." The implications of his words hit me like a physical blow. "I don't understand." "You will." He stood, moving around the desk to a section of shelves marked with symbols I didn't recognize. "But first, I want to see what you can do with these." He pulled down several books, their leather covers worn smooth by countless hands. The text on their spines looked ancient, written in languages I'd never seen before. "Elena says you can read," he said, setting them on the desk between us. "Show me." I hesitated. This felt like a test, but I wasn't sure what the right answer was supposed to be. Slowly, I reached for the top book and opened it to the first page. The text was in English, but the style was archaic, full of elaborate script and formal language. In the time before memory, I read aloud, "When the moon hung low and the first wolves walked between worlds, there came a blessing that would change the very nature of our kind." Darius had gone very still. Continue. "The moon goddess chose 7 bloodlines to carry her special gifts. These wolves would be known as the moon-blessed, and they would serve as bridges between the mortal realm and the divine. Their blood would run silver as starlight, their power would flow from the source of all things, and they would be the guardians of the ancient ways." My voice trailed off as the words sank in. Silver blood. Like the flash I'd seen in my reflection yesterday, so brief I'd convinced myself I'd imagined it. "Interesting choice of reading material," I said carefully. "Keep going." I turned the page, but the text here was in a language I didn't recognize, flowing script that seemed to shift and dance before my eyes. I started to tell him I couldn't read it, but then something strange happened. The symbols began to make sense, as if my brain was translating them automatically. But power draws enemies like flame draws moths, I found myself reading, though I had no idea how I was understanding the foreign text. The other packs feared what they could not comprehend, and so began the great hunt. One by one, the moon-blessed lines were extinguished, their light snuffed out by jealousy and terror. Until only whispers remained, and the children of the moon were lost to time. The book slipped from my suddenly nerveless fingers, hitting the desk with a soft thud. I stared at Darius, who was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "How?" I whispered. "How am I reading that?" "The same way you've always known you were different," he said quietly. "The same way you taught yourself to read when no one else thought you were worth teaching. The same way you survived in a pack that should have destroyed you years ago." He reached across the desk and took my hand in his. His skin was warm, rough with calluses, and the touch sent electricity racing up my arm. "The moon-blessed weren't exterminated," he said. "They were hidden. Scattered. Their bloodlines went dormant, waiting for the right time to awaken." "You're saying I'm..." I couldn't finish the sentence. It was too impossible, too enormous to put into words. "I'm saying you're exactly who I thought you were the moment I caught your scent in that barn." His thumb stroked across my knuckles, and I shivered at the contact. "The last of the moon-blessed. The one I've been searching for my entire life." "But I don't have a wolf," I protested weakly. Everyone said what they could see," he interrupted. "But some wolves don't wake up until they're ready. Until they're safe. Until they're home." Home. That word again, spoken in his voice like a promise. "I need to show you something," he said, standing and moving to one of the glass cases that held the most ancient texts. "This is why I brought you here. Why I needed you in the library." He unlocked the case with an old-fashioned brass key and withdrew a scroll that looked like it might crumble at his touch. Carefully, he unrolled it on the desk before me. It was a map, I realized. Not of any geography I recognized, but of something else entirely. Lines of power flowing between symbols, connecting points that pulsed with their own inner light. "The ley lines," Darius explained. "The veins of magic that run through our world. For centuries, they've been growing weaker. The old magics are dying, and with them, our connection to the source of our power." "What does this have to do with me?" His finger traced one of the pulsing points on the map. "Only moon-blessed blood can reawaken the ley lines. Only you can restore what we've lost." I stared at the map, trying to process the enormity of what he was telling me. "And if I can't? If you're wrong about what I am? Then our kind dies slowly, generation by generation, until we're nothing but regular humans with sharp teeth." The weight of his words settled on my shoulders like a physical thing. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I was just a slave girl with no special powers. But as I looked at the map, the lines seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. And when I glanced down at the golden cuffs around my wrists, they were glowing with soft, warm light. "I'm scared," I admitted in a whisper. "I know." His hand covered mine again, and this time I didn't pull away. "But you're not alone. Not anymore." I looked up into those incredible golden eyes and felt something shift inside my chest. Whatever I was, whatever power might be sleeping in my blood, I wasn't the same helpless girl who'd been chained to an auction block yesterday. "Where do we start?" I asked. His smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. "With this." He reached for the silver letter opener on his desk, its blade catching the morning light. Before I could ask what he intended, he'd drawn it gently across my palm, not deep enough to truly hurt, but enough to bring up a thin line of blood. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as I watched in fascination and terror, my blood began to glow. Not red, not the crimson of normal human blood, but silver bright as moonlight, pulsing with its own inner fire. Darius sucked in a sharp breath. "There you are," he whispered, and his voice was full of wonder and something that sounded almost like relief. "My little star. Finally." The cut healed as we watched, leaving no trace except the fading silver glow. I flexed my fingers experimentally, marveling at the fact that there wasn't even a scar. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Darius said, his eyes never leaving mine, "we wake up your wolf." Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. The howls that shattered the pre-dawn silence weren't welcoming ones. I jolted awake in the massive four-poster bed, my heart hammering against my ribs as the sound of snarling and breaking glass echoed through the palace corridors. The golden cuffs around my wrists had gone blazing hot, pulsing with urgent light that painted the room in amber shadows. Something was wrong. Terribly, desperately wrong. I stumbled to the window and pressed my face against the cool glass. Below in the courtyard, shapes moved in the darkness, wolves, but not the sleek, controlled forms I'd seen among Darius's pack. These were wild things, all matted fur and foam-flecked muzzles, their eyes reflecting the security lights like crimson stars. Rogues. And they were inside the palace grounds. A crash from somewhere nearby made me jump back from the window. I could hear Elena shouting orders in the hallway, her usually composed voice sharp with panic. Guards thundered past my door, their heavy boots a counterpoint to the inhuman sounds coming from deeper in the palace. The golden cuffs were burning now, sending waves of heat up my arms. Through their connection, I could feel something that made my blood run cold, pain. Darius was in pain. I didn't think. I just ran. The hallways were chaos. Servants fled in all directions while guards formed defensive lines, their faces grim behind silver-laced weapons. I pushed through them, following the pull I felt through the golden bonds, letting instinct guide me toward whatever was calling to my very soul. "Miss, you can't," a guard tried to catch my arm, but I twisted away with speed that surprised us both. "Where is he?" I demanded. "Where's the Alpha King?" "The main hall, but..." I was already running again, my bare feet silent on the marble floors. Behind me, I heard Elena calling my name, but I couldn't stop. That pull in my chest was growing stronger, more desperate, and with it came a rising tide of something I'd never felt before. Power. Raw, untested, but undeniably mine. The main hall was a war zone. Massive wolves circled like sharks, their eyes gleaming with the madness that marked rogues who'd been too long without a pack. Furniture lay in splinters, and the ancient tapestries hung in shreds. But at the center of it all, like the eye of a hurricane, stood Darius. Even wounded and outnumbered, he was magnificent. His partially shifted form, more than human but not fully wolf, moved with deadly grace as he fought off 3 attackers at once. But I could see the strain in every line of his body, could smell the copper scent of his blood in the air. There were too many of them. At least a dozen rogues, and more streaming in through the shattered windows. His guards fought valiantly beside him, but they were being overwhelmed. Well, well, a silky voice purred from the shadows near the great fireplace. What have we here? I spun to see a woman emerging from behind the overturned furniture. She was beautiful in the way poisonous flowers were beautiful, all golden hair and perfect features with eyes like chips of winter ice. Her expensive dress was pristine despite the chaos around her, and she moved with the fluid confidence of someone very sure of their own power. Lady Vivian, I breathed, recognizing her from the portraits in the hall. Darius's cousin, the pack's leading lady in his absence of a mate. The little slave girl, she said with a smile that never reached those cold eyes. How precious. Come to watch your master die. Ice ran through my veins at her words, followed immediately by a heat that had nothing to do with the golden cuffs. What did you say? Oh, didn't anyone tell you? Vivian examined her perfectly manicured nails with casual indifference. Dear Darius has been feeling under the weather lately. Something he ate, perhaps. Or rather, something that's been added to everything he eats. The implication hit me like a physical blow. You've been poisoning him. Wolfsbane is such a useful herb, she mused. Just a little bit, over time, weakens even the strongest alpha. Makes him vulnerable to accidents like this. A roar of pain from across the hall snapped my attention back to Darius. One of the rogues had gotten past his guard, raking claws across his shoulder. Blood soaked through his torn shirt, and I saw him stagger slightly. The sight of his blood, his pain, did something to me that I couldn't have prepared for. The power I'd felt building in my chest exploded outward like a dam bursting, flooding every cell in my body with liquid fire. No, I snarled, and my voice carried a resonance that made every wolf in the hall freeze. You will not touch him. Vivian's eyes widened slightly. Impossible. You're just a worthless. I am moon-blessed, I said, and the words rang with absolute certainty even though I'd never spoken them before. I am his mate. And I am done hiding. The transformation hit me like lightning. I'd heard wolves describe their first shift, the breaking of bones, the tearing of skin, the agony of flesh reshaping itself. But this was nothing like that. This was like being born, like finally becoming what I was always meant to be. My human form dissolved in a cascade of silver light, and when it reformed, I was no longer the small, frightened girl who'd been sold at auction 3 days ago. I was something else entirely. The wolf that stood where Kira had been was massive, larger than any ordinary shifter, with fur that gleamed like captured starlight. My eyes were liquid silver, bright as the full moon, and when I threw back my head and howled, the sound shattered the remaining windows and sent every rogue in the hall cowering. It was the howl of something ancient, something that had walked between worlds when the earth was young. It was the voice of the moon goddess herself, channeled through her chosen daughter. The rogues didn't just flee. They scrambled over each other in their haste to escape, whimpering like beaten dogs. Within moments, the hall was empty except for Darius, his guards, and Vivian, who had gone bone-white with shock. I padded across the debris-strewn floor, my massive paws silent on the marble. The guards parted before me like water, their faces filled with awe and no small amount of fear. But when I reached Darius, I shifted back to human form, not caring that the transformation had left me naked. Kira. His voice was hoarse with wonder and exhaustion. Blood still seeped from his wounds, and I could see the grayish tinge around his eyes that spoke of poison working through his system. I pressed my hands to the worst of his injuries, and silver light poured from my palms. The cuts sealed themselves under my touch, the poison burning away like mist before sunlight. When I was finished, he looked more alive than I'd seen him since our first meeting. My mate, he breathed, cupping my face in his hands. My Luna. You're finally awake. I've been looking for you for so long, I whispered, and somehow I knew it was true. Not just in this lifetime, but in others. Through centuries of searching, of hoping, of waiting for this moment when our souls would finally recognize each other. His lips found mine then, and the kiss was like coming home after a 1,000-year exile. Power flowed between us, mate bonds snapping into place with an almost audible click that resonated through my bones. He was mine, and I was his, and nothing in this world or any other would ever change that. How touching, Vivian's voice cut through our moment like a blade. But I'm afraid your little reunion will be rather short-lived. We turned to find her standing near the fireplace, no longer alone. A dozen new wolves had entered through the side passages, not rogues this time, but pack members whose scents I recognized from around the palace. Their eyes held the same cold calculation as their ladies. You see, Vivian continued, beginning to pace with predatory grace, I've been planning this for quite some time. The poisoning was just to weaken dear Darius enough to make him vulnerable. The rogue attack was meant to finish him off and eliminate his mysterious new pet. I never expected. Her gaze swept over me with something like grudging admiration. Well, I never expected this. Darius had gone very still beside me, and I could feel the rage building in him like a gathering storm. My own cousin, he said quietly. My own blood. Nothing personal, darling, Vivian said with a shrug. But you've been Alpha King for 60 years, and what do we have to show for it? A scattered pack system, weakening bloodlines, and now this, she gestured dismissively at me, this abomination that shouldn't even exist. Careful, I said softly, and my voice carried the weight of moonlight and starfire. You're speaking about your future Luna Queen. Her laugh was like breaking glass. Luna Queen? You're a slave. A nothing. I am the last daughter of the moon-blessed lines, I said, stepping forward. Silver light began to gather around me like living flames. I am the bridge between worlds, the guardian of the ancient ways, the one prophesied to stand at the Alpha King's side when the final darkness comes. The wolves backing Vivian began to shift uneasily, but she held her ground. Prophecies are just pretty words. Power is what matters, and I have enough loyal followers to. You have traitors, Darius interrupted, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. Wolves who've forgotten their oaths, who've chosen ambition over honor. They will be dealt with accordingly. Will they? Vivian smiled, and it was the most beautiful, terrible thing I'd ever seen. Because I don't think you understand the situation, cousin. Every wolf in this room has been taking my orders for months. Every guard, every servant, every. Not every servant. Elena's voice came from the main entrance, and I turned to see the head of household standing there with what looked like half the palace staff behind her. But these weren't the scared servants I'd expected. These were wolves in their prime, moving with military precision, and their eyes held the gold glow of absolute loyalty to their Alpha King. The household guard, Darius said with satisfaction. Did you really think I'd survived 60 years as Alpha King without learning to tell friend from foe? Vivian's composure cracked at last. This isn't over, she snarled, her human form beginning to blur as she prepared to shift. The old bloodlines are poison. The Moonblessed were hunted for good reason, and I'll finish what? She never got to complete the threat. My wolf surged forward without conscious thought, and this time the transformation was smooth as silk. I hit her in mid-shift, silver fur meeting gold, and we went down in a tangle of claws and fangs. But it wasn't really a fight. She was strong, experienced, vicious, but I was something else entirely. I was moon-touched, goddess-blessed, carrying the power of an entire extinct bloodline in my veins. When our eyes met in that moment before I ended it, I saw her finally understand what she'd tried to destroy. Then it was over. I shifted back to human form as Elena approached with a robe, wrapping it around me with gentle hands. The other conspirators had been subdued by the household guard, some captured, others lying still on the marble floor. It's finished, I said, though I wasn't sure if I was speaking to Darius or to myself. No, he said, pulling me into his arms. Now it begins. I looked up into his golden eyes, seeing my future written there in flames and starlight. The prophecy says that when the last Moonblessed takes her place beside the Alpha King, a new age will dawn for our kind. His thumb traced my cheek, and I leaned into the touch. An age of power restored, of ancient magics reawakened, of wolves who walk proudly in both worlds. And if I'm not strong enough? If I can't live up to what everyone expects? Then we'll figure it out together, he said simply. That's what mates do. Mates. The word settled over me like a blessing, warm and right and completely terrifying in its implications. But as I stood there in the ruins of Vivian's ambition, surrounded by wolves who looked at me with something approaching reverence, I felt something I'd never experienced before. I felt like I belonged. So what now? I asked. Darius smiled, and it was brilliant as sunrise. Now, my Luna Queen, we plan a coronation. Outside, dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and silver. A new day was beginning, and with it, a new chapter in the long history of our kind. I was no longer Kira the slave, the worthless girl with no wolf. I was Kira the moon-blessed, Kira the Luna Queen, Kira the bridge between worlds. And I was finally, completely, home. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. The first thing I felt when consciousness returned was cold. Not the gentle coolness of mountain air, but the bone-deep, unnatural cold that came from ancient magic designed to suppress and contain. The second thing I felt was the absence of Darius's presence through our mate bond, a hollow ache where his steady warmth should have been. I tried to open my eyes, but even that simple movement sent spikes of pain through my skull. When I finally managed to focus, I found myself in what looked like a cave, though the walls were too smooth, too perfectly carved to be natural. Symbols covered every surface, glowing with a sickly green light that made my stomach turn. And there, studying an ancient tome by the light of those cursed runes, sat Lady Vivian. Awake at last, she said without looking up from her reading. I was beginning to worry I'd used too much of the binding spell. It would be such a shame to damage you before I could extract what I need. I tried to move and discovered I was chained to the cave wall with what looked like silver, but felt wrong against my skin. The metal burned, but not with the clean fire of regular silver. This was tainted somehow, twisted into something that actively repelled my moon-blessed nature. Cursed silver, Vivian explained, finally lifting her gaze to meet mine. Mixed with the blood of the last moon-blessed wolves to be executed 3 centuries ago. Quite effective at containing your kind, I'm told. Where am I? My voice came out as a croak, my throat raw as if I'd been screaming. Safe, she said with a smile that made my skin crawl. Hidden away in the old catacombs beneath the Silverwood Mountains. These tunnels have been forgotten for so long that even Darius doesn't remember they exist. Which is perfect for our purposes. I tested the chains again, trying to summon the silver fire that had come so naturally during our fight in the palace. But the cursed metal seemed to drink in my power, leaving me feeling drained and hollow. Don't bother, Vivian said, returning to her book. Those bindings were specifically designed to hold moon-blessed wolves. Your ancestors helped forge them, ironically enough, back when they still believed in cooperation between the bloodlines. How long have I been here? 3 days. She turned a page with delicate fingers. Long enough for your devoted mate to tear the countryside apart looking for you. Long enough for my allies to position themselves throughout his territory. Long enough for everything to fall into place. 3 days. The mate bond might be muffled by whatever dark magic surrounded this place, but I could still feel the echo of Darius's desperation, his rage, his growing despair. It was like a constant ache in my chest. He'll find me, I said with more confidence than I felt. Oh, I'm counting on it. Vivian closed the book and stood, smoothing down her pristine white dress. Even here, in this nightmare of a place, she looked like she'd stepped from a magazine. In fact, I've made sure he will. The question is whether he'll be willing to pay the price I'm asking. Ice ran through my veins. What price? His throne, naturally. His pack. His entire carefully constructed alliance of unified territories. She began to pace, her heels clicking against the stone floor. Everything he spent 60 years building. You're insane if you think. Am I? She stopped directly in front of me, those winter blue eyes glittering with malice. Tell me, little Moonblessed, what do you know about how you came to be enslaved in that pathetic pack? The question caught me off guard. My mother's gambling debts were manufactured, Vivian finished. Every card game, every bet, every descent into addiction, all carefully orchestrated by wolves in my employ. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's impossible. My mother chose to gamble. She chose the bottle over. She chose nothing. Vivian's voice was sharp as breaking glass. She was fed a steady diet of mind-altering herbs from the time you were 5 years old. Herbs that enhanced addictive tendencies, that clouded judgment, that made her increasingly dependent on substances that would lead to debt and desperation. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Why? Why would you? Because, she said, crouching down so we were at eye level, your mother figured out what you were. She started asking questions, started researching the old bloodlines. She even reached out to the royal archives, trying to trace your father's lineage. My father. The man my mother had always refused to talk about, claiming she didn't even remember his name. He was Moonblessed too, wasn't he? I whispered. The last of the Shadowmere line, actually. Killed in a hunting accident when you were 3 months old, an accident I arranged, naturally. But your mother kept digging, kept pushing, kept threatening to expose the truth. So I had her eliminated. The casual way she said it, eliminated, like my mother was nothing more than an inconvenient problem to be solved, sent rage flooding through me so pure and hot that for a moment, the cursed chains actually glowed with silver light. You murdered her, I snarled, pulling against the bonds until the tainted metal seared my flesh. You destroyed her mind and then you killed her. I protected the natural order, Vivian corrected coolly. The Moonblessed were a mistake, an aberration that threatened the proper hierarchy of our kind. They were eliminated for good reason, and I've spent decades making sure they stayed eliminated. But you missed me. A regrettable oversight. I thought keeping you enslaved, keeping you suppressed and ignorant, would be enough. I never imagined you'd survive long enough to manifest your abilities. Her eyes glittered with something that might have been admiration. You're surprisingly resilient, I'll give you that. If you wanted me dead, why not just kill me years ago? Because, she said, standing and returning to her tome, dead Moonblessed wolves are useless to me. Living ones, on the other hand, can be quite valuable indeed. She gestured to the symbols carved into the cave walls, and I noticed for the first time that some of them were glowing brighter than others, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. These are siphoning runes, she explained. Designed to slowly drain your power and transfer it to a more worthy recipient. The process usually takes several days to complete without killing the source, but I've been refining the technique. Horror crawled up my spine. You're going to steal my abilities. I'm going to take what should have been mine from the beginning, she corrected. The Moonblessed were always meant to serve, not to rule. Your power combined with my intelligence and ambition will create something far greater than either could achieve alone. Darius will stop you. Darius, she said with a laugh like tinkling bells, is about to make the most romantic, foolish decision of his very long life. Even as we speak, my allies are moving into position throughout his territory. Alpha Marcus of the Northern Reaches, Alpha Helena of the Coastal Packs, Alpha Bronson of the Desert Clans, all wolves who remember the old ways, when strength determined leadership and packs fought for territory instead of bowing to some central authority. My blood ran cold. Those were some of the most powerful alphas in North America, commanding vast territories and thousands of wolves between them. They're going to attack. They're going to reclaim what's rightfully theirs, Vivian said. The pack system was never meant to be unified under a single ruler. Wolves are meant to fight, to conquer, to take what they can hold. Darius's peaceful kingdom is an insult to our nature. So you're starting a war. I'm finishing one that should have ended 3 centuries ago. She turned back to me, and her expression was almost pitying. The old bloodlines understood their place. They served the strong, used their gifts to benefit their betters, and were content with their role. It's only in recent generations that they began to think themselves equal to true wolves. We are true wolves, I said through gritted teeth. Your mutations. Useful ones, to be sure, but mutations nonetheless. She flipped through several pages of her book before finding what she was looking for. The binding ritual is nearly complete. In another few hours, I'll have absorbed enough of your power to begin the real work. What real work? Rewriting the fundamental nature of wolf society, of course. Her smile was brilliant and terrible. With moon-blessed abilities flowing through my veins, I'll be able to command the ley lines themselves. I'll reshape the magical foundations of our world, make the strong stronger and the weak weaker. Natural selection as it was meant to be. The implications of what she was describing hit me like a sledgehammer. She wasn't just talking about stealing my power, she was talking about using it to fundamentally alter the supernatural world, to create a hierarchy where only the most ruthless could survive. You'll destroy everything, I whispered. I'll perfect everything, she corrected. Starting with your precious mate's kingdom. As if summoned by her words, a tremor ran through the cave. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the green glow of the runes flickered. Right on schedule, Vivian murmured, glancing at an ornate pocket watch. He's found us. The tremor came again, stronger this time, and I could hear something that made my heart leap, howls. Not the wild, chaotic sounds of rogues, but the organized war cries of a pack in formation. Darius, I breathed. And his loyal guards, yes. Though I'm afraid he's walking into quite the trap. Vivian moved to what I now realized was a scrying pool near the back of the cave, its surface shimmering with magical energy. Come and see, dear. This should be educational. I couldn't move, but the angle of the pool let me glimpse what she was seeing. The entrance to the cave system was surrounded by Darius's forces, maybe 24 wolves in their shifted forms, with more arriving by the minute. At their head, magnificent even in his desperation, was Darius himself. But they weren't alone. As I watched in growing horror, other shapes began emerging from the forest around them. Hundreds of wolves, surrounding the rescue party in an ever-tightening circle. The allied alphas Vivian had mentioned, bringing their full forces to bear. He can't win, I said, my voice breaking. There are too many of them. Oh, he could win, Vivian said conversationally. If he called in all his allies, if he marshaled every pack loyal to the crown, if he turned this into the kind of massive territorial war that would reshape the continent. But that would take time, and by then, you'd be dead and I'd have what I need. The truth of her words settled over me like a shroud. Darius had come quickly, with only his most trusted guards, because every moment I spent in these cursed chains was another moment of my life draining away. So he has a choice, she continued. Save his kingdom, or save his mate. Protect everything he's built, or protect the woman he loves. Another tremor shook the cave, and through the scrying pool, I could see that the battle had begun. Darius's guards were fighting valiantly, but they were vastly outnumbered. Every moment they held the line was another moment bought with blood. He'll choose his duty, I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. He's the Alpha King. He won't abandon his people for one person. Won't he? Vivian's smile was knowing and cruel. Let me show you something interesting. She waved her hand over the pool, and the image shifted to show the interior of the cave system. Darius was fighting his way through the tunnels, leaving his guards to hold the entrance while he came for me alone. His face was a mask of determination and desperation, and even through the muffled bond, I could feel his singular focus. Find Kira. Save Kira. Nothing else mattered. He's already chosen, Vivian said softly. The moment he learned you were taken, he abandoned strategy for emotion. He's fighting his way to you while his kingdom burns around him. The sounds of battle were getting closer now, echoing through the stone corridors. I could hear Darius's war cry, could feel his presence growing stronger as he fought his way deeper into the mountain. This is what love does, Vivian continued, her voice almost philosophical. It makes the strong weak, the wise foolish, the king into just another man. The Moonblessed understood this, it's why they allowed themselves to be bound by duty rather than desire. You're wrong, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Because I could feel what was happening through our bond. I could feel Darius throwing away everything he'd built, could feel him choosing me over his throne, his pack, his carefully constructed world. Am I? She gestured to the pool again, where the image had shifted to show the battle at the cave entrance. Darius's guards were falling back, overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Soon, the allied alphas would control the entire mountain. When this is over, Vivian said, Darius will be a broken alpha with no pack, no territory, and no power. The kingdom he spent 60 years building will be divided among my allies. The unified pack system will collapse back into the territorial warfare that made our kind strong. And you'll rule over the ashes. I'll rule over a renewed world, she corrected. A world where strength determines worth, where the weak serve the strong, where the natural order is restored. The battle sounds were very close now, just outside the chamber. I could feel Darius approaching, could sense his overwhelming relief at finding me alive mixed with his rage at seeing me chained and helpless. He's here, Vivian said unnecessarily. Your devoted mate, come to rescue you at the cost of everything he holds dear. The chamber door exploded inward in a shower of stone and silver light. Darius stood framed in the entrance, his clothes torn and bloody, his eyes blazing with barely contained fury. Behind him, I could hear the sounds of his guards falling back, fighting a losing battle against impossible odds. Vivian, he snarled, his voice carrying the full weight of his royal authority. Cousin, she replied pleasantly. So good of you to come. Though I'm afraid you're rather late. His gaze found mine across the chamber, and the relief and anguish I felt through our bond was overwhelming. Kira. Are you hurt? I'm fine, I lied, not wanting him to know about the siphoning ritual that was slowly draining my strength. Darius, it's a trap. She has allies. I know. His voice was grim. Marcus and his coalition have declared rebellion. They're claiming the right of conquest, demanding the dissolution of the unified territories. And you came anyway, Vivian observed. Even knowing it would cost you everything. Some things, Darius said quietly, his eyes never leaving mine, are worth more than kingdoms. The words hit me like a physical blow. He was here, he was real, he was choosing me over everything else in his world. And it was going to destroy him. How touching, Vivian said. But I'm afraid your romantic gesture is rather pointless. You see, while you've been fighting your way through my tunnels, the ritual has been completing itself. I now have enough moon-blessed power to ensure that even if you somehow managed to rescue your mate, it wouldn't matter. She raised her hands, and power flowed around her, not the clean silver fire of moon-blessed magic, but something twisted and wrong. My power, stolen and corrupted. The old kingdom is finished, Darius. Your unified territories will fall, your alliances will crumble, and wolves will return to their natural state of competition and conquest. You can save your little mate, but you cannot save your world. Through the chamber entrance, I could hear the sounds of the final battle, Darius's guards making their last stand, buying us a few more precious moments with their lives. Choose, Vivian said, her stolen power growing stronger by the second. Abandon Kira and flee to rally your remaining allies for a war you might actually win. Or take her and run, knowing that by the time you reach safety, your kingdom will be divided among my allies and your people will be scattered to the winds. Darius looked at me, and in his golden eyes, I saw the weight of an impossible choice. His duty to his people, to the kingdom he'd spent a lifetime building, warred with his love for me, his need to protect his mate. Darius, I said softly, you have to go. You have to save them. No. The word was flat, final, carrying the absolute certainty of a man who had already made his choice. I won't leave you. Your kingdom will survive without me, or it won't. He stepped further into the chamber, and I could see that he was already planning our escape route, already calculating how to get me out of these cursed chains. But I won't survive without you. The simple truth of his words, the absolute certainty in his voice, broke something inside me. This man, this king, was willing to give up everything for me. Not because he was weak, but because he was choosing love over duty, hope over despair, us over everything else. How wonderfully tragic, Vivian said, raising her hands as corrupted silver fire began to build around her fingers. The great Alpha King, brought low by sentiment. The moon-blessed truly are a curse on our kind. But as she prepared to strike, as the sounds of battle reached their crescendo outside, I felt something stirring in the depths of my soul. Something that the cursed chains couldn't quite suppress, something that her stolen power couldn't quite contain. The mate bond. Not just the connection between Darius and me, but something deeper, the recognition that true strength didn't come from conquest or dominion, but from the willingness to sacrifice everything for the people you loved. "You're wrong," I said, and my voice carried a resonance that made the cave walls tremble. The moon-blessed weren't a curse. We were a gift. And gifts, I added, as silver light began to build around me despite the cursed chains, are meant to be shared. Vivian's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. Impossible. The bindings should contain a moon-blessed wolf acting alone, I said as the light grew brighter. But I'm not alone. I never was. Because that was the secret the moon-blessed had always known, the truth that Vivian in all her research had missed. Our power didn't come from individual strength, it came from connection, from love, from the bonds that tied us to others. And my bond with Darius was stronger than any cursed chain. The chamber filled with silver fire as I called upon not just my own power, but his. Our combined strength, our unified purpose, our absolute certainty that we would face whatever came next together. It was time to show Vivian what the moon-blessed were truly capable of. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. The silver fire that erupted from me wasn't just light, it was revelation. As my power surged against the cursed chains, they didn't just break. They disintegrated, crumbling to dust that sparkled like stardust before disappearing entirely. But more than that, as the stolen magic Vivian had been siphoning from me snapped back like a rubber band, I felt something else flow through me. Memory. Not my own, but older. Ancient. Eternal. The first howl under the first moon. A woman with silver eyes raising her hands to the night sky, calling down power that would reshape the world. The birth of a new species, stronger and more connected to the natural magic than anything that had come before, asterisk. No, Vivian breathed, stumbling backward as my power filled the cave. This isn't possible. The bindings were perfect. The ritual was working. But I wasn't listening to her anymore. I was seeing, understanding, remembering things that had been hidden in my blood for generations upon generations. The Moon Temple. This wasn't just any cave, this was the original sacred space, where the first Luna had performed the ritual that created our kind. The symbols carved into the walls weren't just runes for binding power. They were the original spell work, the magical foundation upon which all werewolf existence was built. And Vivian, in her arrogance and ignorance, had been trying to corrupt it. "You have no idea what you've done," I said, and my voice carried harmonics that hadn't been heard in this place for centuries. "This isn't just a cave. This is the heart of our world." I stood, the chains falling away like water, and felt the presence of every wolf within 100 miles as if they were standing right beside me. The allied alphas who'd come to destroy Darius's kingdom, his own loyal guards fighting desperately in the tunnels above, even the rebels themselves. I could feel them all, connected to me through bonds older than recorded history. "Kira." Darius's voice was filled with wonder and something approaching awe. "What's happening to you?" "I'm remembering," I said simply. "I'm remembering who I really am." Because it wasn't just that I was moon-blessed. I was the moon-blessed. The direct descendant of the original Luna, carrying not just her power but her purpose. Every werewolf alive today carried a fragment of magic that had first flowed through my bloodline. Vivian's face had gone white with understanding. "The Prime Luna. You're her descendant." "I'm her heir," I corrected. "And you've been poisoning the source." The corrupted power she'd stolen from me was spreading through the ley lines like infection, weakening every wolf it touched. No wonder the allied alphas had been so easy to turn against Darius. Vivian's corrupted magic had been feeding their darker impulses, amplifying their greed and ambition while suppressing their better natures. The land itself is dying because of you, I said, gesturing to the sickly green glow of the corrupted runes. You've been using stolen power to twist the very foundations of our magic. I've been perfecting it. Vivian snarled, her composure finally cracking completely. The original system was flawed. Weak wolves had too much power, strong wolves had too little. I was creating natural balance. You were creating slavery, I said flatly. You were building a world where only the cruel could thrive. She raised her hands, corrupted silver fire gathering around her fingers. Then I'll finish what I started. I'll drain every drop of power from your worthless bloodline and remake this world properly. The magic she hurled at me should have been devastating. But when it struck the silver light surrounding me, something extraordinary happened. Instead of harming me, it was absorbed, purified, returned to its original state. Because that's what the Prime Luna's power did. It didn't dominate or control, it healed, it restored, it brought balance. You can't steal what was never meant to be taken, I said, stepping forward as more of Vivian's attacks were absorbed and purified. The moon-blessed power doesn't belong to any one wolf. It belongs to all of us. I reached out with my consciousness, following the ley lines that flowed from this sacred space to every corner of the continent. Everywhere Vivian's corruption had spread, I began to cleanse it, restoring the natural balance that had been twisted by her ambition. The effect was immediate and profound. In the tunnels above us, I felt the allied alphas suddenly stop their attacks, confusion replacing the unnatural bloodlust that had been driving them. Outside the cave system, wolves who had been ready to tear each other apart began to remember why they had originally chosen unity over warfare. What are you doing? Vivian demanded, her stolen power flickering as I systematically undid everything she'd accomplished. I'm giving them back their choice, I said. I'm letting them remember who they really are. Because that was the secret the Prime Luna had built into our very nature. Werewolves weren't meant to be solitary predators or tyrannical rulers. We were meant to be a community, a family, a species that was stronger together than any individual could be alone. Vivian's next attack was desperate, fueled by panic rather than strategy. She threw everything she had at me, all the power she'd stolen, all the corruption she'd spread, all the twisted magic she'd accumulated over years of careful planning. It wasn't enough. The silver fire that rose from me to meet her assault wasn't just my power anymore. It was the combined strength of every wolf who'd ever lived, channeled through the bloodline that had given them life in the first place. It was the power of community over conquest, love over fear, unity over division. When the two forces met in the center of the cave, there was no explosion, no dramatic clash of opposing magics. There was simply truth, pure and undeniable, burning away everything false until only reality remained. Vivian's stolen power simply left her. Not violently, not painfully, but like water flowing back to its natural course. The corrupted magic that had sustained her ambitions for decades returned to the ley lines, cleansed and restored to its original purpose. She collapsed to her knees, suddenly looking every one of her centuries. Without the stolen power to sustain her, age and the weight of her crimes caught up with her all at once. This isn't over, she whispered, but there was no strength left in her voice. Yes, I said gently, it is. The cave around us was transforming as the original magic reasserted itself. The sickly green glow of corruption was replaced by the warm silver light of properly functioning runes. The symbols that had been twisted into binding spells revealed their true purpose, not to contain power, but to channel it, to ensure it flowed freely to all who needed it. The Moon Temple, Darius breathed, looking around in wonder. This is the original Moon Temple. This is where it all began, I confirmed. Where the first Luna chose to share her power instead of hoarding it. Where she decided that no one should rule through fear alone. I could feel the battle above us winding down as the cleansed magic spread through the tunnels. Alphas who had come for war were remembering why they had originally sworn loyalty to the crown. Guards who had been fighting desperately were laying down their weapons as former enemies knelt in submission. "They're all bowing," Darius said, his voice filled with amazement. "Every alpha in the mountain range. I can feel them through the pack bonds. They're acknowledging your authority." "Not mine," I said, reaching for his hand. "Ours." Because that was the other truth I'd remembered in those ancient visions. The Prime Luna hadn't ruled alone. She'd had a mate, an equal partner who'd helped her shape the new world they were creating. The original Alpha King, who'd understood that true strength came from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. The prophecy, Darius said, understanding dawning in his golden eyes. The Luna Queen who would stand beside the Alpha King and usher in a new age. Not stand beside, I corrected. Stand with. As equals. I turned to address the cave itself, speaking to the sacred space that had witnessed the birth of our kind. "I claim my birthright as heir to the Prime Luna. I claim my authority as protector of the ley lines. And I claim my right to reshape this world into what it was always meant to be." The response was immediate. Power flowed up from the earth itself, through the temple, through me, and out along every magical connection that linked wolf to wolf across the continent. But this wasn't the dominating force that alphas used to compel obedience. This was invitation, offering, the chance for every member of our kind to choose what they wanted to be. "The slave system is abolished," I declared, and felt the words carry through the ley lines to every pack territory. "No wolf shall own another. No debt shall be paid with flesh and blood. No accident of birth shall determine worth." Gasps echoed through the tunnels as the magical declaration settled into reality. Chains broke, debts dissolved, and thousands of enslaved wolves across the continent suddenly found themselves free. "The pack system is reformed," I continued. "Alphas shall lead through service, not domination. Betas shall advise through wisdom, not fear. Omegas shall be protected and cherished, not oppressed." "Kira," Vivian whispered from where she knelt, her voice full of horror. "You're destroying everything. Without hierarchy, without natural order, our kind will fall into chaos." "Our kind will learn to thrive," I said firmly. "Just as they did in the beginning, before fear corrupted the Prime Luna's gift." I raised my hands, and silver fire flowed from my palms to touch every carved symbol in the cave. One by one, they blazed to life with their original purpose, not to bind or control, but to connect and empower. "Let the ley lines run clean," I said. "Let the magic flow freely. Let every wolf find their own strength, their own purpose, their own path to happiness." The transformation rippled outward like waves from a stone dropped in still water. I could feel it spreading through the magical network that connected our kind, corruption being cleansed, imbalances being corrected, artificial hierarchies crumbling to make way for something better. In packs across the continent, wolves were looking at each other with new eyes. Alphas were remembering that leadership was about responsibility, not privilege. Betas were finding their voices again. Omegas were standing tall, no longer forced to cower in submission. And in the underground temples and forgotten sacred spaces where the old magic had been strongest, other descendants of the original bloodlines were beginning to stir. Not just moon-blessed, but the children of all 7 original lines that the Prime Luna had chosen to share her gift. "It's beautiful," Darius said softly, and I turned to see wonder written across his face. "I can feel it, every wolf in my territory, in all the territories, waking up. Like they're remembering a dream they'd forgotten." "Not remembering," I said, taking his hand and feeling our bond strengthen and deepen. "Choosing. For the first time in centuries, they get to choose who they want to be." The sounds from above had changed completely. Where there had been battle cries and the clash of weapons, now there were voices raised in wonder, in greeting, in the tentative rebuilding of relationships that had been strained by artificially induced conflict. "Your Majesties," a voice called from the tunnel entrance, and I turned to see Alpha Marcus of the Northern Reaches approaching with his head bowed in submission. Behind him came the other allied alphas, their faces filled with shame and confusion. "We remember now," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "The corruption that twisted our thoughts, that made us believe." He trailed off, unable to finish. That power was meant to be hoarded instead of shared, I said gently. That strength came from standing on others instead of lifting them up. That fear was a better foundation than love. How can you forgive us? Asked Alpha Helena, tears streaming down her face. We tried to destroy everything you'd built. We were ready to kill you both. Because, Darius said, squeezing my hand, you weren't really yourselves. The corruption made you into something you were never meant to be. And because, I added, this is what the Prime Luna's gift was always supposed to do. Not punish those who made mistakes, but offer them the chance to be better. One by one, the allied alphas knelt before us, not in defeat but in genuine recognition of what we represented. Not rulers who demanded submission, but leaders who offered guidance towards something greater than any of them could achieve alone. Rise, I said, and my voice carried to every corner of the cave complex. Rise, and help us build something worthy of the gift we've been given. As they stood, I felt the final pieces of Vivian's corruption burn away in the cleansing fire of renewed purpose. The woman who had caused so much pain was still kneeling in the center of the cave, but she was no longer the terrifying manipulator who had nearly destroyed our world. She was just a very old, very tired wolf who had forgotten what it meant to belong to something larger than herself. What will you do with me? She asked quietly. I exchanged a look with Darius, and saw my own thoughts reflected in his eyes. Justice was important, but so was mercy. Punishment could serve a purpose, but healing was what our world truly needed. You'll live, I said finally. But not as you were. The stolen power is gone forever, you'll age naturally, die naturally, like any other wolf. And you'll spend whatever time you have left helping to repair the damage you've done. That's not punishment enough, Alpha Marcus protested. The pain she's caused, the lives she's destroyed, will be balanced by the lives she helped save, I said firmly. The Prime Luna's gift doesn't work through vengeance. It works through transformation. I knelt in front of Vivian, looking into eyes that were no longer cold and calculating but simply lost. You have a choice, I said. You can spend your remaining years fighting against the changes we're making, clinging to the old ways that brought you nothing but emptiness. Or you can learn what it means to be part of something greater than yourself. For a long moment, she stared at me without speaking. Then, slowly, she bowed her head. I choose to learn, she whispered. The transformation wasn't instant, centuries of corruption don't heal overnight. But I could feel the first tentative stirrings of something that might, eventually, become redemption. Then we'll teach you, I said, standing and offering her my hand. All of us, together. As we emerged from the Moon Temple into the pre-dawn light, I was struck by how different the world looked. The same mountains, the same forest, the same sky, but everything was suffused with possibility in a way that hadn't existed when we'd entered the cave. Hundreds of wolves had gathered in the clearing around the temple entrance, drawn by the magical upheaval they'd felt through the ley lines. Pack members and rebels, guards and prisoners, all standing together in the silver light that still emanated from my skin. My queen, Elena said, approaching with tears in her eyes. The reports are coming in from all across the continent. Slaves are walking free, corrupt alphas are being challenged by their own packs, and the ley lines are stronger than they've been in generations. Not my queen, I said, smiling at the woman who had been one of the first to show me kindness in this new life. Our queen. This belongs to all of us. Darius stepped up beside me, his arms slipping around my waist in a gesture that felt as natural as breathing. The old kingdom is finished, he announced to the gathered crowd. But something better is beginning. Something we'll build together. A cheer went up from the crowd, but it wasn't the forced enthusiasm of subjects honoring their ruler. It was the genuine joy of people who had just been offered the chance to become their best selves. There will be challenges, I said, raising my voice so everyone could hear. Change is never easy, and there will be those who resist what we're trying to build. But we have something our ancestors could only dream of, we have choice. We have the freedom to decide what kind of world we want to create. What do we do first? Called out one of the younger wolves, her eyes bright with possibility. I looked around at the assembled crowd, former enemies standing shoulder to shoulder, old hierarchies already beginning to dissolve, new alliances forming based on shared purpose rather than forced submission. We go home, I said. We go home, and we start living like the family we were always meant to be. As the sun crested the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and silver, I felt a deep sense of completion settle over me. The frightened slave girl who had stood on an auction block less than a week ago was gone, transformed into someone I was only beginning to understand. But more than that, I could feel the entire werewolf world transforming around us. Old wounds healing, ancient divisions being bridged, the promise of the Prime Luna's original gift finally being fulfilled. Ready to go home, my Luna Queen? Darius asked softly, his golden eyes warm with love and pride. Ready to go home, my Alpha King, I replied, standing on my toes to kiss him as silver fire danced around us both. We had work to do, a world to reshape, a new age to usher in. But for this moment, surrounded by our people under the rising sun, I was exactly where I belonged. Free. Powerful. Loved. Home. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also, to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.